With permission from the ranking minority member, Senator Crapo, we're going to get started. And I also, before I begin my remarks, I want to welcome formally our new members, Senator Johnson, Senator Tillis, Senator Blackburn. We said hello when you came for the organizational meeting. It's your first hearing, and I think a very appropriate one. The committee meets today to discuss Daniel Werfel's nomination for IRS Commissioner. We want to welcome him back to the Finance Committee. We know him well. I expect that a significant portion of the hearing will focus on IRS funding that was included in the Inflation Reduction Act. That's where I'll begin. And colleagues, I'm going to focus on 3 points. First, for some time, I've talked about the two tax systems that exist in America. One's for firefighters and nurses and teachers, and their taxes come straight out of every paycheck. And then there's another tax system for the billionaires and the high flyers, who to a great extent can pay what they want when they want to. So today we're going to focus on ending the two-tiered system of enforcing America's tax laws. That's what's needed. It's a big part of what Democrats sought to address in the Inflation Reduction Act, because audit rates today are far higher for those of modest means than the very wealthy. Second point, the Inflation Reduction Act makes sure that the IRS gets the resources to go after tax cheating by the big guys, the ultra-wealthy, the multinational corporations. Now, there are members who oppose that effort, and I get that they want to deflect and distract. That's why people have heard about these fantasies about 87,000 agents armed with rifles busting down people's doors. If you don't want to engage on the real issue, which is tax cheating by the ultra-wealthy multinational corporations, you change the channel. You try to talk about something else. Third, contrary to a lot of baseless attacks you hear today, improving technology and staffing up customer service is a big win for law-abiding families and small businesses. In my view, they're going to be less likely to face an audit thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act. I'm going to briefly touch on each of these 3 points. Working people and the middle class today have a 99% rate of compliance with the tax code. Yet working families who claim the Earned Income Tax Credit get audited far more than do the wealthy folks. Didn't get that way by accident. A decade of Republican budget cuts gutted the IRS's ability to do the kind of in-depth enforcement work that's needed to make sure that the multinational corporations and the very wealthy pay what they owe. From 2012 to 2020, our economy got a whole lot bigger. Yet the total dollar amount of unreported taxes uncovered by corporate audits fell by nearly 60%. Over the last decade, audit rates of wealthy taxpayers making more than $5 million a year fell by 90%. On the other hand, the audit rate for working people didn't budge, even though the IRS was working with fewer resources. That means working Americans bore a much heavier burden. That's where my second point comes in. When Democrats wrote the Inflation Reduction Act, we decided it was long past time to say to the multinational corporations and the tax cheats at the top, nobody is above the law, and that includes you. That's why the bill included new resources for enforcement. Democrats have made clear that the funding is not going to go to auditing Americans who earn less than $400,000. In fact, during the debate on the legislation, Republicans actually struck legislative language from the bill that would have constructed even stronger guardrails on this issue. For Democrats, this is about going after cheating at the top and doing a better job of collecting what the very wealthy and the big corporations already owe. The official tax gap says that $540 billion in taxes goes unpaid each year. We asked the IRS Commissioner, Charles Rettig, about this because we thought it was higher. He said it could be as high as $1 trillion. So the Inflation Reduction Act funding is going to help us get at that issue. Finally, better technology and better customer service personnel is going to allow us to go a long way to relieving headaches for typical taxpayers and small businesses. More customer service personnel is going to make a big difference because in the past it's been a struggle to get anybody on the phone when you call the IRS with a question. In the spring of 2021, to show some progress, 11% of the phone calls got through. Pretty darn low. Last year it was 13%. In the early stages of this filing season, colleagues, it's up to 90%, a huge improvement. These tech upgrades and more personnel ought to reduce the odds that a law-abiding family or a small business faces an audit. These days, taxpayer information goes into a lot of outdated systems that struggle to communicate with each other. Fixing that is going to help the IRS better use the information it already has. If the IRS can answer its own questions and resolve issues proactively, it's less likely that a busy parent, or let's say, colleagues, the owner of a small local restaurant opens the mailbox one day to find a scary letter from the tax man. With that, we want to thank Mr. Werfel for his willingness to return to public service in the IRS. We had a good conversation when he came by. I believe the President made an excellent choice with his nomination. There's a lot of history of working with the Finance Committee, and it's been positive. I know the late Senator Hatch was very fond of Mr. Werfel, and we look forward to our discussion. Senator Crapo.